What's up, scholars? Welcome back to another video. Today I am here to discuss episodes 5 through 8 of the Avatar: The Last Airbender live action. Now, I did my review for episodes 1 through 4 last Monday, or this past Monday, and I really enjoyed doing that video. I do like this show. I'm critical of it only because Avatar: The Last Airbender is my favorite show. So, of course, I have a little bit of biases towards it. So I am critical of it, but my critiques of the show doesn't come from a place of hate. It just comes from a place because it just means that much to me. That's all this is. And I think a lot of the hate that the show is getting is completely unwarranted, and people are getting sometimes too nitpicky, and I know I'm probably guilty of the same thing. But some people are getting too nitpicky and complain a little bit too much about things that shouldn't be that big of a deal, especially with casting choices or how different things look on people. And I think they're getting a little too nitpicky with things like that. That's not what I'm here to critique. That's not what I'm here to look at for the Avatar: The Last Airbender live action. I'm here to look at the characters and the storytelling and the writing. That is something I've always been very passionate about. That's what I talk about in my One Piece reviews all the times, is the story, the characters, and Oda's writing. That's what I get just so passionate about in everything I talk about on this channel. So of course, when coming to Avatar, I'm going to be talking about the same exact things. Because my last review was almost an hour long, and probably too long at that, I'm going to try to keep this one a little more succinct and a little bit more generic while still being specific about certain things that I definitely want to talk about. So we're gonna try. If you're not new to my channel, if you have been watching my videos for a while, you know I am a talker. And you're probably laughing at the thought of me being succinct about something, so there's that. But if you're new to this channel, I'm going to try to keep my word on that, so please have faith in me. And who knows, for my returning viewers, I might surprise you and be able to keep this to like maybe a 30-minute video. Probably not. Besides that, I am mainly going to focus on 3 things that I want to talk about in this section, and those 3 things are characters and the storylines associated with those characters. I am going to be mentioning a few other things that happened in these last 4 episodes that either I liked or I wasn't sure about, but I'm mainly going to focus on 3 things. And the 3 I'm going to be focusing on is Zuko, Aang, and Katara. Because these 3 are so critical. I mean, they're all critical to the show, but Aang's journey is very critical as he is the Avatar, so seeing him go on a separate journey by himself in the last few episodes of this before we get to the North Pole is very interesting to me. You have Katara, which I had said in my previous video that I wanted to talk about her a lot because I have my issues with how they handled her character. And then we have Zuko, who I've cried enough about Zuko in the original version, in the animated version, and I'm crying over him in the live action too. It's not much of a change. It doesn't take much to get me to cry, but my goodness, I'm crying a lot. So those are the 3 I mainly want to focus on. That's not to say any of the other characters did bad, any of them weren't good. Those 3 in particular I want to talk about the most. So quickly, we're going to talk about episode 5 and the good points that I actually enjoyed. Episode 5 is called Spirited Away. It isn't, of the 8, I don't know how I would rank it amongst the strongest episodes, but it does have its good points in it. We have the introduction to the spirit world, which the spirit world looks amazing. Ko is nightmare fuel. He was already nightmare fuel in the original version, and seeing him in live action. I hate bugs. Things that have more than 4 legs should not be here. I don't like bugs. I'm not a fan of insects. Like, there are some, like, grasshoppers, they're fine. Crickets, fine. Like, they're fine. You get into like the centipede nature, spider. No, absolutely not. Those things are unessential to anything in my life, and I don't want any part of them. They need to get as far away from me as possible. And seeing Ko in live action was just more than nightmare fuel. I was just visibly uncomfortable the entire time he was on screen, and the way they did the face changes, and when he took the face of a monkey, that was terrifying. That was very well done. They did a great job handling what Ko looked like, and Heibai looked incredible. Absolutely incredible. It was so cool. They handled him as a monster very well. The other spirits that we saw looked really cool. We got a glimpse of Wan Shitong from the library episode of season 2. And we got a new spirit in the form of Yue, which I'm personally not a fan of. But if they, which I think this might have been a little bit of a nod of what they did, if they incorporated their visit into the spirit world with the swamp from season 2, which is why Katara has that vision of her mother, and then Sokka ends up seeing Yue, but it just, not sure how I felt about that because of how they characterized Yue in the North Pole, so that's kind of I'm not a fan of it, but it didn't kill the show for me. I will say they handled the aspect of the characters' traumas, the characters' fears very well in the spirit world. We got to see Katara reliving this horrific moment of her mother's death over and over again, and she continues to see it, and she's reliving this moment, and accompanied by the nightmare fuel that is Ko. I mean, yeah, that's just not a good day. And at the end, when they get out of the spirit world in episode 6, it makes sense why her and Katara, or her and Sokka, just look so drained and so like sickly almost. And Sokka has this vision, a recollection of a conversation he overheard from Hakoda, his father, talking to Bato about his ice dodging, which I do have a slight issue with that because I'm not sure why they characterized Hakoda like that. Hakoda wasn't like that at all in the original. He wasn't ever disappointed in Sokka. He wasn't ever, oh, well, Sokka can never become a warrior, or he's not, he was never like that. So I don't know why they made that change to Hakoda's character, because it actually doesn't add anything to their relationship, to their dynamic, other than just make it very awkward and weird for Sokka to want to see his father again. And their dynamic is completely different now. So I don't know why they did that. I wasn't a big fan of that because it's a twist on Hakoda's character that didn't need to be there, because Sokka already has a lot of burdens and responsibility. He already has a lot of fear that he's not a good warrior, that he's not a good leader. He already has all of those insecurities beforehand without, his father saying these things to him. He didn't need that as a motivator to have these fears be present. He already had them. He already had these insecurities and these worries because he is the oldest in his tribe. He's been left in charge. That carries a huge burden on his shoulders as is. So him looking after the tribe as a 13-year-old whenever his father left, yeah, that already has a lot of pressure, and that's already going to amount a lot of insecurities in him, especially as he gets out into the real world and see how much he's actually lacking. I'm not sure why they did that, but going forward, if they're gonna do that, if they're gonna continue that, they're gonna have to make some significant changes to Sokka's confrontation with his father in season 2. So I'm unsure about how I felt about that. Regardless, Sokka also is reliving some of his worst memories and is suffering because of that. And again, that's why he and Katara look so sickly and pale at the end of episode 6. What I did like about the spirit world is the moment we get with Gyatso and Aang again, because it brings up the concept of people being able to live in the spirit world past death. We saw that idea and concept in Korra with Iroh. So seeing that with Gyatso staying behind just to be able to talk to Aang one more time, even though he doesn't stay, even though he does end up leaving Aang behind, that was so nice to be able to see their confrontation, see them have that moment again to bond and reconnect, and Aang being able to see his friend and former teacher again. It was a really special moment, and I did like how they did that. It's interesting to me. I'm not a huge fan because the gang spends a lot of time separated from each other. In the original, we have moments where these characters get to bond together, and that is what makes these impact of moments hit harder, because we see how they've been together, how they've bonded and grown together. We haven't seen a lot of that. I'm not saying not at all, but we haven't seen a lot of it in the live action because of how they've switched up the storyline, because of how they decided to showcase a lot of these things. They've stripped away some of those character interactions and that bonding that we have between characters, which impacts Aang quite a bit as a character, because when he's so desperate to go to Avatar Roku's shrine so he can contact Avatar Roku to talk about what he stole from Ko, which is a weird addition. It's weird because we, as watchers, those who have seen the original Avatar The Last Airbender, know how precious Katara and Sokka are to Aang. But for newer viewers, are they going to feel that same sense of urgency that Aang feels? Because if you're watching it, it's like these characters haven't spent that much time together. And I know that's not always the situation. Some people, they meet, they click, and they're automatically like best friends and really protective, and that's fine. I would just like to see more of those character interactions that were left out, because it does add that impact to the storytelling. For me personally, I would have taken away some of the time they spent in the spirit world, because they did change a lot of Ko's characteristics. Even though he's a face stealer, when Katara and Sokka show expressions, and even Aang, they show expressions on their face, he doesn't steal their face. So that loses some of the impact there. We have Heibai's issue not really fully being resolved. It's just kind of skimmed over with Aang burying a acorn in front of Heibai's shrine, or Heibai's statue. So that whole thing gets skimmed over to really explore the concept of the spirit world. And while that's fine and while that's okay, there's a lot of core story that's being missed out because this side of it is being explored. Something just needed to make up for that towards the end. We got a lot of it being made up for with Zuko and Aang, but not with the main gang, with Aang, Katara, and Sokka. We get less of that and more Zuko and Aang. And if it could have been reframed a little bit, and time-wise they could have reshaped some things, skimmed some things down, and kind of reordered it a little bit, I think it would have made things maybe flow a little bit better and the story feel more cohesive. That's just my opinion. That's really all I want to say about I will say, Azula in episode 5, we get the introduction of her blue fire, which looks cool. It's interesting to see what they're doing with Azula's dynamic with Ozai, because they're really focusing on the manipulation of Ozai on his children, and in this case we really get to see him manipulating Azula, and Azula frustrated with it, trying to fight back against him by saying no, and then retaliating just to show and prove that she's worth enough, that she is enough, and that he needs to quit testing her and he needs to just let her do what she can. I like that. I'm curious to see how that's going to translate into the Azula we know in season 2. That's going to be where we see if this groundwork in season 1 pays off, or if the groundwork in season 1 doesn't. So I'm not going to criticize that addition. I liked seeing Fire Lord Ozai. I liked seeing Azula. and Mei and Ty Lee. I'm just interested to see how that groundwork is going to be played out in season 2. We're going to talk about episode 6, which is called Masked, and is arguably, I think, my favorite episode in the entire first season. It was incredible from start to finish, just incredible. The pacing was good. The storytelling in this episode was really good. I know people have complaints about Zuko actually fighting back against Ozai and the Agni Kai. I totally get it. It's very valid because it creates a different dynamic with Zuko and Ozai, but this is still an adaptation and this is still a retelling, so it's not going to be one-to-one. And for the concept of what Ozai is doing with Zuko in the live action, what he's doing to his children in the live action, forcing Zuko to stand and fight, not doing anything until he does, still hits very hard because it's even more of a cruel emotional impact because of the extra addition we get of actually seeing Zuko getting banished, actually seeing Ozai rubbing his loss in his face and shaming it for him to his face. Instead of just hearing Iroh talk about it, we're seeing it, and it does hit very hard. And I think they handled it really well. So yes, it is different. Yes, Zuko not wanting to fight is what made him dishonorable, what made him shameful in the original. But and a lot of people are like, oh well, Zuko almost beat Ozai. That's a horrible thing. No, he didn't. Ozai could see Zuko coming. He was prepared for it. But when Zuko hesitated, when Zuko didn't attack, that's when he got angry. Because he was ready to dodge Zuko's attack. But because Zuko showed mercy, that's when Ozai was like, oh no, you're done. I don't see that argument as valid, really. But I like how they handled it. I do. I like how they handled the Agni Kai because they are really putting an emphasis on the manipulation, the horror, and just the cruelty of Ozai towards his children. I like how they've emphasized it towards both Zuko and Azula. You see it in different ways. I liked it. I personally liked how they did it. And in episode 6, Aang gets captured and thrown in prison because, well, originally he was captured by June, which June was perfect. The actress for June was just perfect. It's like she got just ripped out of the screen and just perfect. I loved the characterization. Her flirting with Iroh was hilarious because of Zuko's disgusted faces. It was so funny. Absolutely hilarious. And then Zhao comes in and forces Zuko to hand Aang over, and that's when Aang gets in prison and Zuko shows up under the guise of the Blue Spirit to break Aang out. And that whole scene is so cool. They did it so well. It looks beautiful. The fights, the bending, the choreography was insane. I loved the graphics. I loved everything about that entire scene. Zuko getting Aang out, and they showed the little blood trickling from his neck to show that Zuko was serious. He's like, no, I'll do it. I'll definitely do it. And then, of course, Zuko gets knocked out. Aang figures out who he is, and he takes him, and they end up hiding in this little shack, waiting for the soldiers to disappear. Before I get to that, I'm talking about it out of order. Aang and Zuko's conversation. I loved it. I loved their conversation. Aang asking about what brushes he uses, them talking about their daily routines, him making Zuko crack like a little bit of a smile, them having a genuine conversation. And then as soon as Aang says well, you don't have to be like the other firebenders, you can show some compassion, and that word triggering Zuko because of the Agni Kai, and him saying compassion is a sign of weakness, and then he tries to attack Aang blows him back, and then they go to the boat. Compassion is a sign of weakness is what Ozai said when he burned Zuko, which, oh my goodness, the actual Agni Kai, like, speaking of it, when he hits Zuko in the chest with fire and, like, pins him down and has his hand and is just, that was so tough to watch. Like, I was crying. I was absolutely crying. And it was so sad and painful to watch that being done. And I could even go into detail because people were saying that Zuko's scar wasn't big enough like the original, but because they did switch up how they did the Agni Kai, it wasn't a fire blast from the front, so it scorched half his face. Ozai literally just held his hand over Zuko's eye. So yeah, it makes sense that it's much smaller. So, I mean, I had no problem with how it looked to begin with, but if you want an explanation, there you go. Then him in bed, resting, Iroh trying to cheer him up, Zuko just completely dejected, and then Ozai coming in. And the conversations that Ozai has with Iroh, when Iroh tries to defend Zuko before the Agni Kai, and Iroh's like, that's your son, and Ozai looks at him and he says, we'll see. And then when they're talking again, when Zuko's trying to rest, and Iroh says he's hurt, and Ozai says he'll recover. They're really nailing how much of a jerk Ozai is. Just saying. They're doing a great job with that. And that conversation Ozai has with Zuko, saying, oh, well, you have to get rid of the weak. You have to get rid of compassion. Like, that's what it means to be a leader. And Zuko still trying to defend his moral beliefs, still trying to defend himself, says the weak can get strong if you give them a chance. And that being the last straw for Ozai, saying, like, I failed. You're worthless to me. I'm gonna send you out to capture the Avatar. This impossible mission because everybody thought the Avatar was dead. And that's the only way you'll become worthy. That's the only way you'll have worth to me, is if you remove this last threat. It's the only way he'll get his honor back. And it's the 41st Division. That edition had me sobbing. Actually had me sobbing. When Iroh explains that Zuko stood up for the 41st Division to say it wasn't right to just send a squadron in to die, and then getting burned, having that sacrifice, and then Ozai saying, oh, well, if you care for them so much, here they are, they're yours. As a mocking, like just mocking him. Oh. Commander G learning that and saying, like, well, we're the 41st Division. After their whole spats, after their back and forth, after his outburst that I wrote earlier saying that, well, he's not our prince. And then Zuko getting back after his last conversation with Aang, where Aang asked, do you think we could have been friends? And Zuko just throws some fire at him and they leave, they separate. Him getting back on the boat, injured, saying, I've been through worse. And then them all coming to attention and saying, our prince has returned. That moment was so good. That moment was so well done. I love how they handled it. And then Iroh's speech about the mask, as we get Aang going back, you know, to get Ko's thing and get Katara and Sokka back, and then going to see Gyatso and Gyatso not being there, and the feeling of being left behind, him feeling abandoned once again because he's once again all by himself. And Iroh's, that moment with Aang and Gyatso, that was rough. But Iroh's whole speech about the masks was truly beautiful. And the ending where he's putting the blue spirit mask up, saying the mask is who we truly are. Amazing. That is a 10 out of 10 episode for me. 10 out of 10. It was amazing. I absolutely loved it. It did so much for Zuko's character, and it did a lot for Aang's character too. I really loved how they did that. And now we get into the ending with episodes 7 and 8. I'm going to kind of combine them together because there are two main things that I want to talk about. Okay, three things. Just three things. Three things I want to talk about with these last episodes. I'm not sure with the additions they did to UA. I'm don't know how I feel about that. First, big gripe. Aang didn't learn waterbending. Aang did not study waterbending, did not start his training for waterbending. He did nothing with waterbending, which is huge. So I don't know if they're going to do like a time skip from season 1 to season 2 and they're leaving the North Pole and it's been a couple years. He's had a few years because they don't introduce this comet until the very end of season 1. So I know they're handling the comet differently because, you know, the seasons are actually taking quite a bit of time, so the actors and actresses are naturally going to grow up and get a little bit older. So are they going to do just a time skip to say, hey, he spent 2 years training in waterbending now and he's a master? Or like how are they going to handle that? Because him not doing waterbending is a pretty contentious point, because him learning waterbending was what started the whole Katara and Paku debate to begin with, because she wanted to learn from Paku alongside Aang, Paku saying no, and then that whole fight starting, then Katara wanting to learn from Aang so that he could just teach her what he knows, and then that sparking another fight with Paku, and then Katara finally standing up to him. We don't get any of that. So that's a thing. Not really a fan of that, but if they can amend that in season 2, fine. The spirit world change up for how he figures out who the 2 koi fish are. Not sure how I feel about that. It happened. I wasn't a big fan of it, but it happened. But what I did like, the way they did the water monster with Aang was really cool. It looked really, really cool. And him bending inside the monster looked really cool. I loved that whole sequence, that fight sequence with him inside and fighting against the Fire Nation and driving the ships back. That whole thing looked really, really cool. My biggest concern, I guess, comes from how he was called out of that, because the moon came back and they were like, oh, but the Avatar's gone, he's no more, he's lost to the spirit. I didn't quite understand that part. But the way he kind of comes out of that with Katara calling to him was a little abrupt. I do think the biggest issue with Aang is that he hasn't shown a lot of progression towards his actual journey in learning as the Avatar. He hasn't started that personal growth of knowing that he's got people beside him. I know that's one of the things that he focuses on, is that he's afraid to lose anybody, so he's going to try to push them away, or he doesn't want them to fight. And everybody keeps telling him the Avatar has to be alone, so I guess he has to be alone. I get it, and I get what they were trying to do with it, but Aang's character suffered because he didn't get to focus on the actual acceptance of his role as the Avatar, the actual acceptance of his journey to become a fully fledged Avatar, because he doesn't try to learn the other elements. He doesn't even try to start waterbending. Even when Katara offers him early on, he turns her down and doesn't even attempt to start it even in the North Pole. So his character suffers a little bit because of that, and I'm curious to see how they're going to adapt that in season 2, especially with the introduction of Toph. Because, I mean, there's no, oh, well, I'm gonna wait. Like, that's not gonna work. That's not gonna fly anymore. I really want to see his character go through the growth that Aang goes through in the next coming season, because in season 1, Aang does have a significant amount of growth, especially when it comes to the North Pole. In season 2, he has huge amounts of growth, and then in season 3, he continues to grow even more. Some, not all of it, but some of that growth for season 1 was stunted. And I want to see how they manage to work with that going forward with his character because of the changes that they've made to him, and kind of see how they salvage some of those changes to see what progression he goes through, what direction his character is going to go to. He's still goofy. He's still a goofy kid at times, and they kept some of the childlike charm for Aang. I think the kid actor is just perfect. He's perfect for Aang. But because they are taking a little bit more of a serious turn on the character, they have to make sure to incorporate the character's growth alongside that, and not just a constant back and forth struggle. There is constant back and forth struggle when it comes to character growth, when it comes to character progression, but it's not just back and forth, stagnant or digression. We need to see a little bit more, I guess, forward motion with Aang is what I'm trying to get at. It's not to say he had no growth in the live action. He did have some growth in the live action, and I think it was good. I think it could be better. I still think he did a good job with what he was given. My main issue then, we're gonna get to Katara. I have to preface this by saying Katara is like my second favorite character in all of Avatar. Zuko is my favorite character in Avatar. Katara is my second. Iroh is in a category all on his own, okay? Like, he's just everybody's favorite. Katara has always been one of my absolute favorite characters. Katara is a strong female character. She is kind and compassionate and full of love and hope and care for others, but she's also very fiery. She's stubborn. She has a temper on her, and she can get mean at times, but she's just so loving and caring and compassionate, and a lot of that gets missed with Katara's character, and I'm really saddened by that. I really hope it wasn't because the writers saw the negative traits by some online people who don't get Katara as a whole or just don't like her, and decided to take those negative traits away so that they wouldn't get backlash. I'm really hoping that's not the case. I don't think it would be, but I don't understand how the writers mischaracterized Katara so much. And it just pains me because she is one of my favorite characters. It just pains me. We don't get to see her motherly side. We don't get to see her temper. We don't get to see how kind and compassionate she is. We don't get to see her give these beautiful speeches and inspire others and give others hope. We don't get to see any of that. Again, I know I said it in my first part, but I'm going to reiterate it here. I'm not criticizing the actors or actresses. I am not criticizing them. The actress for Katara did a great job with what she was given. I am talking about the writing. Because there's just this huge potential for an amazing, strong female character, and you stripped away a lot of her core and just left the rest of it there. And I think that's such a disservice to Katara and to the actress playing Katara, because we see it in the first 4 episodes, but it makes it the height of its mischaracterization in the last episodes, especially when we get to the North Pole and the way Katara approaches the fight with Pakku. There is no reason for a fight with Pakku in the live action. It just kind of happens because it seems like the plot is forcing it to. There's no urgency, there's no righteous anger that she had before. There's none of that is there. None of the original fire and will is there. In the live action, when they get to the North Pole, they have this big feast. Pakku comes up to Katara and they're talking very cordially with one another, and he's like, oh, well, you know, we can't wait to have you start your waterbending tomorrow. And she's like, oh, that's great. And then she goes straight to healing, and she learns her healing, and then after that she's like, okay, well, when do I fight? And the lady, she's like, well, we don't fight. Katara's like, well, that's not right. And she's like, well, that's just the rules. So she goes to talk to Paku, and Paku, he's very demure as well. He's just like, that's just the rules and customs. I'm sorry. There's no antagonism between them. There's no real motivation for Katara to fight him because he's not rude to her. He's not spiteful to her. He doesn't antagonize her like he does in the original. And then it's just like, it goes from there to Katara saying, well, I'm gonna fight him. Huh? Like, I'm not gonna criticize their fight because the fight scene was fine. It was fine. But it's just the actions leading up to that. I have a complaint how they handled the healing aspect because we don't get Zhong, we don't get Katara getting burned, we don't get her discovering she's a healer. And I think that takes away a lot of characterization for our characters as well. But that's for another discussion. My main issue with this is that Katara's motivations aren't clear. Katara's hopes and dreams and her wishes aren't clear. Katara doesn't show a lot of anger. She has arguments with her brother in the live action, and that's about the height of her confrontations. But Katara as a character, ugh, it just, there's so much to say, but I just don't want it to sound like I'm just sitting here complaining and nagging. Because that's not what I'm just sincerely sad because Katara is one of my favorite characters, and it's just, it's rough. It's rough. The writers, I don't understand why they made all of the changes to Katara. Yes, they've made changes to all of the characters. They've tweaked and taken away things from all of the characters in the show, yes. However, it's almost as if Katara's character didn't feel like it was fully grasped by those who were writing her. And because of that, her character suffered greatly. Because we don't get to see the strong-willed Katara who will stand up for others, who will never abandon others in need, who will fight for her life, who will fight for others' lives and for others' freedoms, who will challenge a master knowing she'll lose because she knows what he's doing is wrong, and she's standing up for herself and standing up for her friend. That challenge in the live action doesn't come across as impactful as the original does. Because Katara's motivations, because her anger, because of her passion is lacking. It doesn't make that much of an appearance. What I wanted to see is a girl who gets mad and struggles when she cannot learn waterbending. This last thing that has been left in her culture that she is alone in, and finally getting to learn a little bit about, and getting mad when she can't get moves but others can, and trying to do things recklessly but also trying to be a mother to these people that she's traveling with. She cares about others, she loves others, and she wants to help others, but she's also not afraid to stand up to people, to not back down from her morals and beliefs, and to say what she thinks. And some of that is just absent from the live action because of the way the writers wrote Katara. And it makes me kind of sad. Just makes me really sad. That aside, while yes, I do have my gripes with some of the characters, how they've been characterized, some of the changes to them, and some of the changes to the story, I still thoroughly enjoyed season 1 of the live action Avatar. I thought it was great. They had great music, they had great sets, great costumes, the score was fantastic, the choreography was great, the bending looked incredible, absolutely incredible. The storytelling was strong in certain parts. Zuko definitely carried. Zuko definitely was my favorite, was my personal favorite in the live action. And I thought overall it is a good retelling. It is a good retelling and story, and it's very enjoyable to watch. I will be rewatching it. So even though I have my criticisms, even though I have my complaints, I still enjoyed myself because there were certain episodes that elevated it so high for me. There were some episodes that kind of dropped it down a little bit lower, but all in all, there were more high points than low points. And because of that, it's a much more favorable outcome and an overall really enjoyable watch. And I did. I really enjoyed myself. I'm going to be rewatching it because there is some really good humor in this. There's a lot of fun to be had. I'm going to make myself cry again because why not? And it's fun to watch. They did a really good job with all of the special effects, with all of the designs, everything. They did such a good job. Well, my wishes for season 2 kind of follow along with some of the complaints I have for season 1 is just for the writing and the storytelling, how they structure the story of season 2, to learn from what didn't work well in season 1 to then change and grow and get better from there. Same with the characters, because the characters are going to be growing older, especially our young ones, and they're going to learn what does work for them and what doesn't, and that's just going to help their performances get better as time goes on. So I'm very hopeful for season 2. I want a season 2, and hopefully we get an announcement for one. That would be really cool. And I'm really impressed. I am thoroughly impressed with how they did this. It is a retelling, and for a retelling, they did a good job. So that is my review of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I definitely didn't keep this to 30 minutes, but it's fine. As I started doing this review, I realized as I was talking, I had a lot more to say than I thought I did. It's fine. I'm a little long-winded, but we're fine. We're fine. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you check out my Patreon. This video will be hitting Patreon first. So if you want access to videos before they hit YouTube, make sure you go check out my Patreon. The link is going to be in the description and the comments below. Other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time, scholars. Bye!